Hello, and welcome back to Israel with Aline. In the past few weeks, we've seen news circulating on the internet saying that the Mount of Olives is cracking, that it is opening up. But is this really true? Today we came to the Mount of Olives to see with our own eyes what is really happening in this place. And what is the connection between these phenomena and the fulfillment of biblical prophecies and the return of Jesus? We will also find out what scientists have to say about these future phenomena. So if you are ready, let's get started. Let's start by understanding what the Bible teaches us about the opening of the Mount of Olives. There is a very important prophecy in Zechariah 14 which says that the Mount of Olives will split, and we're going to hear it now. Behold, the day of the Lord is coming. On that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem to the east. The Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, forming a great valley. Half of the mountain will move to the north and the other half to the south. You will flee through my valley between the mountains, because this valley will reach as far as Azal. Yes, you will flee just as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzzias, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and all the saints will come with him. On that day there will be no light but cold and frost, but it will be a unique day, a day known to the Lord. There will be no separation between day and night, for even after night falls, it will still be bright as day. This will happen both in summer and in winter. The Lord will be king over all the earth. On that day, there will be only one Lord and only one name, as we have heard. As we have heard, the prophecy says that the mountain will split from east to west, which is exactly this direction, and that half of the mountain will move toward the south and the other half toward the north, and right here in the middle a great valley will open up. Indeed, these verses speak of a very grand and almost apocalyptic moment. But the question is, why is it going to happen right here on the Mount of Olives? If we look around the old city of Jerusalem, there are many, many hills. The Bible itself tells us, Yerushalayim harim savivla, which means that Jerusalem is surrounded by mountains. So why does this prophecy say that out of all the hills was the Mount of Olives chosen to be opened? That's because the Mount of Olives is connected to two very important prophecies. The first one is related to the Golden Gate, which we see here in front of us. The gate through which Jesus entered on the Sunday of the triumphal entry, and where Ezekiel's prophecy says that it is through this same place that the glory of God will return. Then the man made me return to the outer gate of the sanctuary, which faces east and was closed. And the Lord said to me, this gate will remain closed. It must not be open. No one shall enter through it, because the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered through it. Therefore, it will remain closed. As for the prince, he will sit there, because he is the prince, to eat bread before the Lord. He will enter through the vestibule of the gate and will leave by the same way. And because of this prophecy, the return of Jesus is related to his entry directly through the Golden Gate, which you can see, which was the only gate in the entire Jerusalem temple complex that faced directly toward the Mount of Olives. And the second prophecy related to this place that we need to talk about is very close to us, so come walk with me. As you saw, we took a walk that wasn't very long from the viewpoint to here, and we've already arrived at one of the most important places on the Mount of Olives. Come and see. This is the chapel of the Ascension, the place from where Jesus ascended to heaven 40 days after the resurrection. And this is a tradition that has existed since the first Christians of the Holy Land, long before the construction of this chapel. We have records of a Christian pilgrim named Zechariah who visited this place in 384, and she describes how the place was open and barren in her time. But yes, it was a place of celebration and praise to Jesus and his ascension. And not long after that, a Christian woman named Poimenia helped build the first church at this site, a Byzantine church.
And the remains of that church can still be seen here to this day.
But the most important part of this complex is, without a doubt, its central area, which in the original construction was open to the sky. And of course, the place of Jesus' ascension makes a lot of sense to be really open, but nowadays it is closed. We can see that there is an original rock here, which has been protected since Byzantine times, since ancient times. We can clearly see that it is part of this hill, this open summit that Zechariah also tells us about. And tradition says that it is exactly this place from where Jesus ascended to heaven. The question is, what does all this have to do with future prophecies? And for that, we need to read the book of Acts. The book of Acts tells us about the ascension of Jesus and tells us that in the same way that he went up, he will return. And they kept their eyes fixed on the sky as he went up. Suddenly, two men dressed in white appeared before them and said, "Galileans, why are you looking at the sky? This same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you saw him go." Then they returned to Jerusalem, coming from the mount called Olives, which is near the city, about 1 kilometer away. Because of this prophecy in Acts 1 that Jesus went and will return in the same way, it is believed that this place is the site of Jesus' ascension and also the place of his future return. And it even says that his disciples returned to Jerusalem coming from the Mount of Olives. And that's why, with the return of Jesus, he can walk from here toward the Golden Gate, through the Mount of Olives, connecting these three prophecies. And this walk toward the Golden Gate, we will do together now as well. The view from here is truly breathtaking. It's something spectacular, and we can also see the path we are going to take. We are going to start our descent toward the Golden Gate here, and during our way down, we will look for the famous cracks that are so talked about on the internet, the physical evidence of whether or not the Mount of Olives is opening. Here on our way down, we see right in front of us the Temple Mount, the exact place where the first and second temples of Jerusalem stood, and where nowadays the Golden Dome stands. One of the most important places in the world, according to the Bible. However, unfortunately, a place that nowadays has restricted access for both Jews and Christians. And I wanted to take this moment to talk about something very special that I have here with me. If you noticed, I carry with me a little vial, and inside it, soil taken from inside the Temple Mount. I literally carry biblical history with me. This soil was taken from inside the Temple Mount illegally and discarded by people who wanted to destroy biblical history. The story that we tell here to this day. And that's why archaeologists went and rescued this soil, and they are separating it from the archaeological remains and rediscovering our history so that it will never be erased. This project is called the Sifting Project. And if you also want to take with you a piece of the biblical history of Jerusalem and help fund these very important excavations, I will now put the QR code on the screen and the link in the description for the Temple Mount soil. It really is something unique in the world and will never be repeated. And it's a gift, without a doubt, unforgettable now for the holiday season. But for now, we keep walking toward the Golden Gate. We see here a large Jewish cemetery. This cemetery is 3,000 years old and is still in use. The tombs here in the upper area are the newest, and the further down we go, the older they are. We have here tombs of biblical figures such as Zechariah, Haggai, Malachi, one of King Solomon's wives who was the daughter of Pharaoh, and so many other people who changed the history of Israel and the Bible. The question is, why take such a privileged place with a spectacular view, the most beautiful view in all of Jerusalem, and turn it into a cemetery? All of this is also related to biblical prophecies. According to the Jewish interpretation of this same prophecy of Zechariah, if the Messiah has to come through the Mount of Olives and he brings the saints with him, and he will resurrect the dead, Jewish belief says that the first dead to be resurrected are those who are buried here. And that's why many thousands of people are buried here, waiting for this day to come. Looking, we see what look like these cracks in the ground, which help us understand a little better the biblical geography, the geography of this prophecy. And as Zechariah says, when the feet stand on the Mount of Olives, it will be split from east to west, and the mountain will open in the middle, half to the south and half to the north. And right here in front of me, what do we see? The Golden Gate? So we see the direct connection from the place of the ascension back. And it's this whole path which will be a great valley all the way to the entrance at the Golden Gate. The prophecy is very clear about the fact that the Mount of Olives will literally split. And when we walk here, we see these cracks. We even see holes along the way. And we see on the internet several people claiming the connection of all this with the fulfillment of this prophecy. However, unfortunately, experts believe that this has nothing to do with earthquakes or with land movements or the opening of the Mount of Olives. Instead, this is simply the poor maintenance that was done here on the Mount of Olives, especially in these last few years when we had the pandemic and the war in Israel. So there isn't any deep crack that's causing this on the surface. Instead, this is just poor asphalt maintenance. However, this is not the end of Zechariah's prophecy, quite the opposite. What experts have discovered here in recent decades is truly surprising. And we're going to go down and see the science behind the great opening of the Mount of Olives. The main theory that talks about the opening of the Mount of Olives says that this will happen through a great earthquake and not an opening over time through small cracks. It is believed that this will really happen in a sudden and violent way through a great geological phenomenon. And what do scientists have to say about this theory? Scientists in the 1980s conducted soil analyses here, and the result is surprising. The Great Mount of Olives, which rises up here on this side, what type of rock is this entire Great Mount made of? Chalk. Imagine this gigantic mount entirely made of chalk. That means the Mount of Olives is made up of weak and unstable rocks. Chalk is a very soft rock, easily eroded, and it loses much of its strength when it's wet. And the mount is made up of 2 layers of chalk. The lower layer is called kaakule, which is a relatively hard and more resistant chalk. And the upper layer is called menuha, and it is made up of a very soft chalk, and it makes up most of the hill. And between these 2 layers, there is a very dangerous material, a chalk called marley, which is superplastic, very fragile and weak. In fact, it becomes 4 times weaker when it's wet. Its behavior is very similar to that of clay. And that's why the scientists concluded that the Mount of Olives is naturally unstable. And I'll leave, guys, all the research, the complete research in English from the scientists linked here in the description if you want to read it for yourselves. And it's really something amazing that this great mount rises more than 750 meters above sea level. It is made in such a fragile way. And what draws our attention even more is the contrast between the Mount of Olives and the old city of Jerusalem, which is right here in front of us. The city was built on the entire mountain, which is made of a limestone that is extremely hard and resistant, and it is much more resistant to earthquakes. That's why, according to scientific articles, it's plausible that if a major earthquake happens, there could be significant damage to the Mount of Olives. Meanwhile, the old city could remain intact. But what is the likelihood of a major earthquake happening here in Jerusalem? And the answer is very high, because according to other scientific research, we are very close to tectonic faults. There is a gigantic tectonic fault throughout the entire Dead Sea region, approximately 30 kilometers from where we are. But even more surprising than this is that from this tectonic fault, a smaller fault branches off in this direction. There is an east-west fault line that passes just a little south of the Mount of Olives, as we can see on this map. It marks the Mount of Olives, and this black line is the tectonic fault. Let's make it clear that it doesn't go through the middle of the Mount of Olives, but it passes very close by, and it has an east-west orientation, just as the prophecy said. And I want you to notice something else on this map. Look at its colors. The different colors represent the different degrees of stability of the soil and the slopes. And if we look at the Mount of Olives, all of it is marked in red. The areas in red represent maximum risk during seismic activities. So what is the reality about the opening of the Mount of Olives? Is it really cracking right now? And the answer is no. We don't have any geological indication here of the mountain breaking. Nothing that indicates the fulfillment of this prophecy at this moment. But we know the Bible, and we know that this day will come. And yes, scientists have come to the conclusion that this is very plausible. Yes, A big earthquake can happen here, and the Mount of Olives is especially prone to earthquakes. And in the case that there is an earthquake, it could split, but not the old city. And so we really see how the Bible tells us about the future of this place. And who knows, maybe one day in the future, I can come here and show you this new valley that will open in this place and the reopening of the Golden Gate. But for now, this day has not yet come, but here we are in Jerusalem waiting for this great day. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and I'll see you next week.